Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has directly accused Saudi Arabia of the premeditated murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, calling it a political killing orchestrated by Saudi officials. Khashoggi was last seen alive entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey, October 2nd. Erdogan said a team of Saudi officials had planned Khashoggi's murder days in advance. During a speech in the Turkish parliament today, Erdogan called for the Saudi suspects to be tried in Turkey.
Onca tutarsız açıklama.
And now there is official acknowledgement that there was a murder. Where is the body? Why do we still not have the body? If the information that the body was given to a local cooperator, co-conspirator, and this is information by an authority, by the way. Now my question is, who is this local co-conspirator?
President Erdogan's remarks directly contradict Saudi Arabia's claim that Khashoggi died during a fistfight in the consulate. Turkish officials have claimed audio and video recordings show Saudi officials used a bone saw to dismember Khashoggi's body. But Erdogan made no mention of any recordings of the killing. In the wake of Khashoggi's murder, Agence France-Presse is reporting exiled critics of Saudi Arabia have shared stories of apparent Saudi attempts to lure them to their local embassies where they feared they might be kidnapped or killed. Meanwhile, in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin met with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman Monday, despite international outcry over Khashoggi's murder. Mnuchin's trip came as the Trump administration sent CIA Director Gina Haspel to Istanbul. In more news from Riyadh, hackers briefly took over the official website of Saudi Arabia's Future Investment Initiative, also known as Davos in the Desert, as organizers prepared to host the high-profile event amidst international outcry over Jamal Khashoggi's murder. The hackers posted a doctored image of Khashoggi wearing an orange jumpsuit with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman standing behind him holding a bloody sword. And Salman has the letters ISIS written on his clothing. This month, the heads of the World Bank and IMF joined a boycott of the conference after top executives from J.P. Morgan Chase, Uber, Ford, Blackstone Group, Siemens, the New York Times, and every other major Western news media organization pulled out. The Trump administration had said Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, would also pull out of the conference, though he ended up showing up in Riyadh. We'll have more on the death of Jamal Khashoggi after headlines with journalist Rula Jibril, whose new cover story for Newsweek is headlined Jamal Khashoggi's secret interview, the Saudi journalist's views of Islam, America, and the reformist prince implicated in his murder. We'll speak with Jibril in Rome, Italy. In Yemen, health officials are warning of possible new outbreaks of contagious illnesses like cholera and malaria due to stagnant waters left behind after Tropical Storm Luban tore through eastern Yemen last week, killing 12 people. This month, the UN warned about 10,000 new cases of cholera appear each week in Yemen. The waterborne disease has been spreading rapidly since much of Yemen's sanitation and medical infrastructure has been destroyed by a U.S.-backed, Saudi-led bombing campaign. National Security Adviser John Bolton is meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin today to discuss the U.S. decision to withdraw from the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or the INF. On Monday, President Trump confirmed the plan to withdraw, said he would build up the U.S. nuclear arsenal.
Until people come to their senses, Russia has not adhered to the agreement. This should have been done years ago. Until people come to their senses, we have more money than anybody else by far. We'll build it up until they come to their senses. When they do, then we'll all be smart and we'll all stop. And by the way, not only stop, we'll reduce, which I would love to do. But right now, they have not adhered to the agreement.
Is that a threat to Vladimir?
It's a threat to whoever you want, and it includes China, and it includes Russia, and it includes anybody else that wants to play that game.
Many experts fear a new arms race. Other countries have spoken out against the move, including France, Germany, and China. Ahead of his meeting with Putin, John Bolton held talks with top Russian officials Monday, including Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Bolton reportedly criticized Russia for meddling in the 2016 U.S. elections, but said the actions didn't have any real effect on the election's outcome. President Trump continued to lash out at the Central American caravan making its way toward the U.S. border, claiming without evidence that terrorists and members of the MS-13 gang had infiltrated the group. Trump tweeted, "Sadly, it looks like Mexico's police and military are unable to stop the caravan heading to the southern border of the United States. Criminals and unknown Middle Easterners are mixed in. I have alerted Border Patrol and military that this is a national emergency, must change laws." Trump also doubled down on his threat to cut aid to Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, and called out Democrats over U.S. border policy in an ongoing attempt to turn the caravan into a main issue in the upcoming midterm elections. Meanwhile, locals who live on the caravan's route have been providing volunteer assistance and basic necessities to the migrants. This is Mexican resident Ana Gamboa.
The only thing I can say to people is that they should be more human, that we should look into our hearts and imagine ourselves in the migrant shoes, because it isn't easy what the migrants are doing. We Mexicans like to criticize Donald Trump for the way he treats Mexicans in the United States, and now we're acting just like him. We don't have any walls on our border, but sometimes we ourselves are the wall.
We'll have more on the caravan later in the broadcast. In Mexico, Tropical Storm Vicente killed at least 12 people in the southern state of Oaxaca over the weekend as landslides and flooding in the region forced many others to evacuate. Meanwhile, Hurricane Will is set to make landfall as a Category 4 storm when it hits Mexico's Pacific coast Tuesday afternoon with sustained winds of 145 miles per hour. The hurricane's expected to pass through the archipelago of Islas Marias, which houses a federal prison, before hitting the Mexican coastline. Human Rights Watch is reporting the United Arab Emirates has been detaining a British academic for months in terrible conditions and without charging him until last week. UAE authorities have now charged Matthew Hedges of Durham University with spying after holding him for over 5 months in prolonged periods of solitary confinement without access to sufficient legal assistance, medical attention, or visits from his loved ones. Human Rights Watch has raised concern over the UAE's practice of detaining critics, academics, and activists, and called for transparency and a fair trial in Hedges' case. Protests continued Monday against the Trump administration's plans to narrow the legal definition of gender to an individual's biological sex at birth. In Washington, D.C., demonstrators gathered outside the White House to denounce the proposed rollback of transgender rights as the hashtag "won't be erased" trended on social media. This is activist Araya Lester of the National Minority AIDS Council.
No words, no action can erase me, and those who stand here with me as well. We must end willful ignorance in this country. We must end the use of bigotry to frame government policy.
The Trump administration's planning to expand exemptions that allow employers who cite moral or religious objections to deny birth control coverage to female employees. President Trump already attempted to roll back the Affordable Care Act mandate requiring employers to cover birth control last year, but several states sued in response, stopping the rules from going into effect. Those cases are still pending. The newly proposed rules could be an attempt to circumvent the ongoing lawsuits from 2017. In Nigeria, authorities have ordered a 24-hour curfew and deployed special forces after sectarian clashes killed 55 people last week. The violence took place in the central state of Kaduna after fighting broke out between youths in the marketplace. Kaduna is home to both Muslim and Christian communities and has seen periods of intense sectarian violence in recent years. In environmental news, the Washington Post reports a 14-year-long oil spill off the Gulf of Mexico is set to become one of the worst offshore offshore disasters in U.S. history. The leak is releasing between 300 and 700 barrels of oil per day off the coast of Louisiana with no end in sight. The spill started after a mudslide caused by Hurricane Ivan in 2004 sank an oil platform owned by Taylor Energy. Taylor Energy kept the spill a secret for 6 years until environmental groups discovered it while monitoring the 2010 BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill just a few miles away. Earlier this year, the Trump administration proposed the largest expansion of leases for oil and gas exploration in history, which would open most of the outer continental shelf to offshore drilling. The Supreme Court decided Monday to shield Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross from being deposed over his role in adding a citizenship question to the 2020 census, reversing a federal judge's recent order. Last month, Mother Jones reported Wilbur Ross lied under oath to Congress about the citizenship question by saying Justice Department officials requested the addition of the question rather than Ross himself. Immigrant rights advocates have condemned the citizenship question. They say it will deter immigrants from participating in the census and could help Republicans win more congressional seats. Authorities have found an explosive device in the mailbox of billionaire philanthropist George Soros at his upstate New York home. Soros was not home at the time, and the investigation has been handed over to the FBI. George Soros has become a target for conservative attacks and is often used as a boogeyman figure for Republican lawmakers and conservative media. President Trump accused protesters at the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings earlier this month of being paid by Soros. In legal news, The Guardian's reporting recently confirmed Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh once lobbied for the judge who's now charged with reviewing over a dozen ethics complaints filed against him. Earlier this month, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts referred misconduct complaints against Kavanaugh to a circuit appeals court in Colorado, alleging Kavanaugh lied to Congress while showing a lack of judicial temperament during his Senate testimony. Beginning in 2001, Kavanaugh was heavily involved in campaigning for Tim Kovich, a conservative judge nominated by George W. Bush, who faced resistance from lawmakers over his stance on LGBTQ rights. Legal experts have called out the conflict of interest in the selection of Tim Kovich to oversee the complaints against Kavanaugh. And at Yale University, the words spoken by Dr. Blasi Fords during her historic Senate testimony last month were seen graffitied on buildings around campus on Monday. One quote from Dr. Blasi Fords, who accused Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh of attempted rape when she was 15 and he was 17, could be seen on the Sterling Law Building, where Kavanaugh once studied. Students tweeted photos of the quotes. "I have had to relive my trauma in front of the entire world," and "indelible in the hippocampus is the laughter." The full quote from Dr. Blasi Fords' testimony is, "Indelible in the hippocampus is the laughter, the uproarious laughter between the two men, and they're having fun at my expense," Blasi Fords testified. During the contentious nomination battle for Brett Kavanaugh, Yale law students held protests and a sit-in at the school, with many also going to D.C. to protest. Brett Kavanaugh went to Yale University and Yale Law School. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.